You're listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, June 14th, 2024. Happy Flag Day, Andrew.
I'm sorry, happy what day?
It's Flag Day.
Oh, Flag Day. I'm sorry. I was like, big yikes, man. Yeah, no, it is June, mid-June-ish.
It just hit hot o'clock here in Sacramento.
Oh,
my God.
Man, I'm so sorry.
We got 105 this week. That was the highest day, and it's sad.
Oof.
I mean, I have to go to jury duty too, which is great. I love serving in a democracy and being a functional and contributing part of it, but it's never convenient.
Not at 105.
Not in 105. What is convenient is getting to hide away from all the ills of the, well, not all of them, because we talk about some of the ills of the world sometimes on the show, but to come and talk about nerdy and geeky stuff with my friend Andrew.
And my friend Dan.
There we go.
Ding.
And got that out of the way. In case you're new to the show, we are friends. And one of the things these two friends do is discuss their respective weeks in geek.
So actually, I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna say it. I don't have a week in geek. I don't. I have a week in hype. Hype.
Are you a barking dog? Hype.
No, this is just So I guess how do I couch the story? So about a month ago, I actually subscribed on Patreon to a YouTube channel, which is not really like it's the YouTube channel. Like the YouTube content is not their big thing. It's a Patreon. It's a private Discord. It's called Knights of Last Call. And I think they got a little bit of popularity because they were playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Is that a Knights with a K or just evening time?
With a K. Knights of Last Call. And they did videos that were, I think they called it Night School with a K. Of like, here's how to be better at playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition. But they also are just role-playing game people.
Sure.
Like they like to play different games. So really, they were not committed to this one game. They play lots of games, and they do videos of mostly the guy in charge. Derek Melendez is his name, and so he does like
doing live plays or just discussing.
No, well they did some
podcast basically, or
it's basically a video cast.
Gotcha.
Mostly them talking. So a lot of the videos they do are talking about role-playing game skills or doing looks at specific role-playing games. They do some streams of actual plays, but those are actually fewer and far between. In fact, they've said those are their worst-rated videos.
Well, they tend to be long, and
so I got into the Discord, was talking to them to the people in the Discord, which again, it's a private, like you only get access to it if you subscribe to the Patreon. So it is actually a very niche group. And it's been a fun thing for me talking about role-playing games. But one of the games, at one point I was actually on the forum or on the Discord saying, God, I really would love if a game, rather than all these tactical games that want you to like you're playing a mini war game or some shit. I was like, I'd love to see something like Octopath Traveler, the JRPG from Square Enix, where it's like, it's more about like, the tactics are doing damage types to enemies and having them being like stunned and blah, blah, blah. And one of the guys, like the lead guy was like, that's just Fabula Ultima. And I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Your ears perked when you heard Ultima. And
I was like, what? So Fabula Ultima is actually a tabletop role-playing game that released, I think, about a year ago. Right. It actually calls itself a TTJRPG.
Nice.
And it is a tabletop role-playing game where the goal, the designer basically said, I want to create, not recreate the JRPG experience, but like the feel.
Okay.
Right, like the kind of the narratives, the story at the table of the JRPG.
some more of narrative style, or maybe even content style. Yeah.
Right. So it's not like you're doing active time battles at the table, right? Like it's not recreating the mechanics. It's recreating the feel of we're playing a Final Fantasy. We're playing, Dragon Quest, whatever.
Gotcha. That gets rid of a lot of the questions I had. But yeah.
And so I actually picked up I ordered the books. They've not come yet. But I actually got their quick start or their press start, I think they call it. And I read through it. I'm like, oh shit. Yeah, this is starting to look like what I wanted. And it's weird to see this game that, because if you imagine like the whole progression of tabletop role-playing games into computer games and video games, into JRPGs, and now the idea that now we have this tabletop role-playing game, which is heavily inspired by Japanese role-playing, video role-playing, computer role-playing games. And that inspiration came from computer role-playing games in America, which were inspired by D&D, right? Except that it's so different now.
Right.
Right? That like the experience this guy was trying to capture, the designer, who, by the way, is Italian. Which I sort of love, like, wait, I'm sorry, what? Right?
I guess you could say those original tabletop role-playing games were based on novels. But
sure. I mean,
like Lord of the Rings and stuff.
Ish. Either way, right? Like, just the whole weird progression of war games and Tolkien lead to the original D&D, right, and that leads to these video games that then lead to these other video games that whatever progression lead to this new tabletop role-playing game.
Right. Will the circle be unbroken?
Yeah, and it is this thing where as I've been reading through it, I'm like, oh, wait, this was the game I think I've been grasping for, right? Mm-hmm. This is great. So I've not played it yet. It's a hype cast. It's a week of hype. But I'm just so excited based on what I've seen, because just reading through the rules, like they have art that's very evocative of JRPGs, but also like the idea that like, oh, here's the pre-made character sheet for the starter set, and there's little icons by like their weapons, and it's just a little pixel art. I'm like, oh yeah, like it does very much evoke the things I like, right?
Yeah. So aside from aesthetics, what about what you've seen so far? Obviously, you don't have the books yet, but you like with the quick start guides and stuff like that. What about any narrative stuff that you've seen really screams JRPG to you? Because I think of things like Chosen One narratives, right? Oh, you are the one. You are, like the Star Wars narrative, basically. Like, oh, you are just a poor farm boy, but you have been chosen by prophecy to save the planet. Oh, and Mother Gaia. Oh, and the Earth blood, and shit like that, right? Like it goes from real small to real big, real fast.
And that is definitely part of it.
Okay.
So one of the things, it's a very collaborative game. So the idea that like is you sit down to play with your friends, you will decide what the world is you're going to play in, decide what is important.
Yep.
But even then, like every character has, kind of traits that define them, and it's stuff like that, right? It is very much that kind of, I'm the person who's driven by duty or rage. But then it's very collaborative. So as you play, players and GM alike are proposing things that make it like, you are driven by duty, whatever your duty is. Oh, this now invokes that. Like we're going to make this villain trigger your duty, right? Like, there's also, things like where there are villains who they like, if they get defeated, they have like the big villains have their own kind of resource to whatever, but they don't die, they escape, right? They don't. It's like you don't beat them the first time. They get away because they always do, right? That's the JRPG thing,
right?
How many times do you have to fight Kafka or whatever, right? Kafka.
Yeah, Kafka. You don't have to fight Kafka.
Sorry, Kafka. You don't fight Kafka.
No. You don't have to turn into a cockroach or anything.
But just that kind of stuff. There's that there. Definitely a lot of like they actually. So one of the things that they've already released. I think they said they're going to do 3 what they call atlases, like setting books, basically. Not for a specific setting, but for inspiration for you as a group. One's like the high fantasy, like the OG Final Fantasy. One is the techno fantasy, the one that's currently coming out, which is like the Final Fantasy 6 and 7. And there's natural fantasy. I have no idea what that one's about, but they actually and they lean into
GMO-free fantasy.
I have no idea. But they also like they cite references. They're like, no, here's the inspiration, right? Like, this was inspired by Xenogears. This was inspired by, Final Fantasy 1 or Final Fantasy 5.
So honestly, what was it called? Natural fantasy?
I think natural fantasy. It's not out yet.
It makes me think of something like maybe Secret of Mana, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, we'll see.
How much of the mechanics have you seen, or are you aware of at this point?
So I know the basic game mechanics because I read through their quick start.
In terms of tabletop gaming and games that you've played, what is it pulling from old and new? Like, I know a lot of newer RPGs tend to focus more on narrative and, collaboration, whereas old school RPGs, I'm talking about like AD&D is really much numbers driven and stuff like that. Where is this kind of falling? What's it pulling from as far as what you've been able to see and kind of what you know?
So what I know, it does the narrative thing, like the collaborative narrative where it very much expects players to contribute story stuff. Like even in the kind of the first time quick start, they have 4 pre-made characters, but then it even says, hey, as the players sit down, ask each player who picks this character. Like if you pick that character, whatever, Blair, Claire, Cassandra, Edgar, and Lavinia Fallbright, which again, they're all very jerpig. But it even says like, if this, when the player who chooses this, ask them to just answer these questions. And those questions are going to define this play session, right? It's not just you're picking up a pre-made character. It's that, the mechanics are pre-made, but you're going to still define something about the world.
Okay.
But it's more important that, like, if you were to play your own game where you make your own characters, one of the first things you do is you sit down and you decide what the world is. Are we playing in, the world that behaves this way, where the, fantasy kingdoms, whatever it is, or are you, is it like a ruined world? Is it a techno world, like a fantasy world? So it is a collaborative thing. It's not like Dan sits down to play D&D and the GM has already built everything. It's that Dan sits down to play D&D or Fabula Ultima, and he is part of the discussion of building the world they're going to play in. So that's the kind of thing I like. That's super cool. It has a lot of also cool stuff, like it leans into things, narrative stuff I like, hey, there's going to be villain scenes where it's like, hey, the players just did something. Now here's a scene where the villain does something. The players may not even be in the scene. It's a cutscene. Like,
but
cool.
that's okay.
Like,
you don't have
again, like JRPGs, that's a thing. You get to see, Sephiroth do his thing. It even says like, oh, but because that happened, the players get a little mechanical bonus, right?
Yeah, okay. But in world diegetically, they don't know why they got a bonus.
Right.
Okay. So the player gets to maintain a bit. It's not as embedded as some gaming sessions can be, where that's like, no, like you don't know what your character doesn't know, right? It's just
it's very much they say in the rules that the players are both writer, audience, and actor, basically.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting.
Which that's a huge thing for me. Like I always joke that my TTRPGs, it's like a writer's room, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's already like touching the things I love. Like, yes, because I want my players to be involved with the story. But I was saying, like, if you're thinking like, oh, but JRPGs, like endless inventory, like the designer even says like it's meant to evoke the feel, not the actual mechanics. So like, hey,
I'm out then.
You actually, one of the things is every character has something called inventory points, which are basically how you buy, like, hey, you're in a battle. Oh, I need a potion. I have 8 inventory points. I'll spend 3 to buy a potion.
Okay.
Right. So it's like, you don't have to like write down all the potions you have. You just have this abstract resource.
Right. Because you have, in theory, 99 potions in your bag, because that's the only thing you spend money on, but you never use them because you're like, I'm going to need these for something important.
Yeah,
but you never
save
use them.
something important.
Yeah.
But it does the cool thing where like that becomes just an abstract resource.
It just assumes
that you and it doesn't, you don't know what it is until you need to use it. Which I also love, because like the idea of like we're playing at a table, I don't want to be counting my bullets, or whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah, no, everything about it, and I'll say like all the fun abstract stuff, but also it has, I think there's like 15, they call them classes, they're more like jobs, right? It is very much Final Fantasy V-esque. Like here are 15 jobs,
Tactics,
like the Dark Knight, the Berberder, and right, you take levels into every job, or at least in not all of them, but and that defines the character. And actually, it is, and without having played it, just having watched other people talk about it, just the idea that like you can have that kind of Cecil moment of like, well, I start as a Dark Knight, and after a few levels of that, I then go into the Paladin, basically. Right. That stuff, it allows that. I mean, obviously, it allows it very well because that's the intent, right?
What's interesting to me saying this is that I'm not going to say it's tapping into a zeitgeist. I think it is creating a zeitgeist moment, for lack of a better word, where the people growing up playing JRPGs are now making games and making, hopefully, again, we haven't played the game yet, good games. Perhaps things that will grab a player base and tell new and interesting stories. And I say this because it's interesting that this is happening right around the same time as something like Sea of Stars. Mm-hmm. Another sort of love letter to JRPGs, but it is actual video game. And I wonder what else is kind of around the corner. I mean, we're seeing, for lack of a better word, American anime with things like the Castlevania Netflix show and I mean, most American-made cartoons are very influenced by anime, which I would also argue are influenced mostly by, or in a lot of ways, by the creator's experience with JRPGs.
Absolutely.
So
what I would say is that, and just to add to that, the game came out, I think, 2023, so last year. Mm-hmm. It actually won the ENnie, which is the award they give at Gen Con. It won Best Game. It also got a silver award, so like second place for Product of the Year. So it's already well regarded in kind of the space.
And there's, God knows, there's an audience for it.
Yeah.
I mean, people like you who have kind of like I want to say aged out, but definitely are turned off by the more traditional TTRPGs of Dungeons and Dragons, right? And nothing against Pathfinder, but it is kind of building.
It's very traditional, yeah. And I think I don't know if I talked about here, but the way I've played. Actually, I'll say one thing being on this Discord is I talk about how I played D&D 10 years ago, or how I play Pathfinder now, and it's like, oh, that's not how we play it, right? And not right. Like some of the players are like, oh, that's not the game I play. And I realize how much I've gotten weird, in 15 years. And the idea that now I read this, I'm like, oh, someone else got weird too, No, I'm
and now with this I can get real weird.
So yeah, this is my hype cast. This is me being so jazzed about this that I bought like all the books in print. I'm about to buy all the PDFs. Like I now have to sell it to the people I play with. Like, hey, let's do this.
This just seems like another piece into the years-long puzzle that you're trying to solve of how to get Dan to play a tabletop game with you. But good luck with that.
But anyway, that's my, I guess, my hype in week. I don't know. It's not a week in geek.
Sure.
That's what I did. Dan, what do you do? What do you do?
I'm playing a video game, not Fallout 76 necessarily. I was getting frustrated with that, not because of the game, but because of the
internet.
Yeah, honestly. But I have been playing another game that actually kind of came up in the discourse on social media a little bit. I don't know why, but I know for me it popped up. I heard an interview with a gentleman named Jake Solomon on a podcast called Dear Dwyery. I think I mentioned it briefly before. Mm-hmm. It's a new podcast, bi-weekly, fortnightly podcast, not about Fortnite, but every other week. Published by created by Danny O'Dwyer, the guy behind NoClip. And they're basically short, half-hour audio documentaries that are just basically interviews with some extra narrative or history woven into it. And Jake Solomon was, I should say, a big developer with Firaxis Games. Most, I think, well known for making the more recent XCOM games.
Really? You're going to do that?
What?
Or Sid Meier's Civilization?
Yeah.
I guess that's a game people play.
I guess. Who would, who cares?
It's I guess they made XCOM.
They made XCOM and they make Civilization. I say XCOM because what I'm talking about today is actually more directly related to XCOM. Because after XCOM, was it called XCOM 2? I didn't play any of them. The second XCOM that Firaxis made, modern XCOM. Yeah. They got this licensing deal with Marvel to make a video game. And so they created a game called Marvel's Midnight Suns, based on a concept from the comics called Midnight Suns, albeit spelled differently.
Wait, how's it spelled differently?
The comic is gendered. Midnight Suns, S-O-N-S.
Oh, as opposed to Midnight Suns. Okay.
Yeah. And the way he talked about it was really intriguing because I listen to a lot of video game podcasts, which means I hear a lot about games I don't play, won't play, or I'm not interested in, but I still kind of hear the discourse about it. And Midnight Suns is interesting. It came out last year. I'm not going to say it was divisive, but it was a polarized kind of response to it. I guess it is divisive. And both sort of accounts were very passionate. People that got the game in terms of understood what they were going for just love it, and the people that just wanted it to be something but didn't get that game, basically people that wanted it to be Marvel XCOM and found out it wasn't that, hated it. But the people that loved it for what it is absolutely loved it. And so it was kind of equally on lists of most disappointing games of the year, but also on best games of the year. I'm what is this game? And it was on sale last year. I'm sure, I'll pick it up. And then I tried to play it, and I just didn't have the patience for it. I was trying to rush through it, which is not what you want to do with a tactical game. And so I'm this is dumb. This is not for me. I don't want to say it was dumb. It's just not for me.
Right.
But with sort of it being in the conversation again recently, I'm I'll check it out. And I'm enjoying it much more this time around, mostly because I'm taking the time to be patient with this game. So what is this game? It's a deck-building tactical combat game. It's equal parts XCOM and equal parts... Oh, gosh. Well, here, I would say, and I'm not a mathematician, Andrew, it's half a card-based deck-building tactical combat game, this sort of XCOM style, isometric, you got your units on this playfield and you're trying to take out the other units and you're looking at percentages and all that stuff, right? But it's based around cards. And then it's also half relationship management game. And then it's also half base upgrade collectible gathering loop game. I think I have too many halves there, but you get the gist.
So many halves.
So many halves, right? At the heart of it there's two sort of systems, or not systems, but loops you're kind of engaging with. There's the combat loop where you go into a mission, and yes, Hydra is causing problems, and they have their units on the play field. You have your units, which your team you always create teams of 3, and the way you interact with the enemy is you have a deck or hand of 8 cards with decks built for each character. And they're all shuffled together, obviously. And at the start of every turn, you have 3 card plays, as it's called, where you can attack, you can defend or fortify, or if you have enough sort of action points built up, you can use what they're called heroic cards to do cool shit, right? And then once you run out of card plays, you end your turn, and then the enemy has their phase. And you go back and forth until you win the round or fail. Mm-hmm. But then once you're out of that, you go back to basically the hub, which is called the Abbey. That's where all the characters you have collected are just hanging out. And you, as the player character, are a unique character to the game, and I guess to Marvel, called the Hunter, a deceased warrior reanimated by the likes of, not Dr. Phil, Dr. Strange. Why did I think Dr. Phil? I don't know.
So Dr. Phil shows up.
Yep.
Ooh,
he's like, you know what? You got to get your act together. You're going to be useless to everybody. No. Doctor Strange and a character called the Caretaker, who is related to, in some fashion, to Agatha Harkness.
Harkness, yeah.
And this game is really steeped in like the magical side of Marvel. Lots of, hex magic and demons and all this fun stuff. And you are a reanimated sort of hero from olden times, and you got to make friends with all the cool heroes because it'll provide benefits for you in battle. If your friendship level is high, then you will get extra rewards or do extra damage or whatever. But also because it'll open new dialogue options for when you're just hanging out at the Abbey, right? Mm-hmm. I'm getting a lot more enjoyment out of it when I'm really taking my time in the battles of actually looking at what cards I've been dealt, figuring out what's the best option here, because there's lots of sort of interplay you can have during the battles of like, okay, I can refund a card play. You only, like I said, you only get 3. You can only play 3 cards per round, mm-hmm. but there's some actions called quick actions where if you use them, you get refunded a card play, and you can can't keep doing stuff. But you can also chain attacks between enemies, or if you can knock back enemies into environmental obstacles that give extra damage or whatever, right? And so it's fun to kind of think through that stuff. And I'm taking my time with it, but what I like about it is it's doing a really good job capturing the Marvel charm, meaning the Marvel that has been established by the MCU. It's very quippy, very kind of jokey and one-linery, but mm-hmm. but earnest, right? And to think that I think it was undersold, or not undersold, oversold. It's not even oversold. It was just the expectations were misaligned based on the company that made it, right? Firaxis wanted to do a specific thing, and they actually did. They made the game they wanted to make. But because of the success of XCOM, and perhaps Civilization, Andrew, if you want me to keep bringing that up, people were like, oh, this is going to be Marvel XCOM. And it is not.
It's not
that. Yeah. But what game is here, once you kind of see what's going on, it's a very fun game. There's lots of different systems, lots of collectibles, overwhelming to a degree that does feel a little bit oppressive, but like it doesn't. A lot of it doesn't seem like it's required, right? It's for people that just want to do everything.
Well, and I wonder. I think a lot about when Firaxis did XCOM, right? That wasn't something that was in their wheelhouse per se,
right? But
they actually did a shockingly good game, and they've then done 2 sequels, essentially.
Mm-hmm, right.
So, like, it is this thing where maybe they've done enough now that people thought, like, oh, you're going to do just like that. Like, no, mm-hmm. They're going to do something different. Yeah, I get the expectation, but also it is kind of surprising because I think Firaxis has always been, since they, started, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
They've actually done a lot of, kind of sometimes off the path stuff. So I mean, who knows?
Yeah, and it just to see it kind of get buried by some negative slap back to expectations versus reality. It kind of reminds me of another good game that got buried. This is from a couple years ago, but who made the game? It was the action game, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, which was also very, very good. A little clunky in places, but it's very well written, very well acted, and very earnest, just like this game is. It's clear that the developers made the game they wanted to make, and for some reason, maybe it just didn't connect with the audience it should have. But the nice thing is, as of this recording, on the PlayStation Store at least, and which I'm guessing it's probably on other places as well, it's on sale for like $20, and I do recommend it because it's fun. And I'm early in on it, and I do tend to bounce off tactical games, but for now, it's got its hooks in me, and it's just fun to see all these characters, and I know there's going to be more characters popping up. So, like, the main characters that are there from the beginning of the game that you're interacting with, there's a very dry and really fun version of Blade, who's quippy but, like, very sarcastic about it. Played by, or voiced by Michael Jai White. They actually got, like, names to be in this game. We have Iron Man, of course, Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers. Who else is there at the start? Oh gosh, what's her name? A character from the Runaways, Nico. I can't remember her last name because I never read the Runaways or saw the Hulu show. And Magic from New Mutants, Colossus's younger sister, and Robbie Reyes, the Ghost Rider.
Oh, Ghost Rider,
but with a car. Yeah.
Mit dem Auto.
Yeah. Yes. I think that's everybody. I've just encountered one Spider-Man, and what they're doing with him is very interesting too. But it's a cool new look at, or not new, but a different, slightly like different look at the Marvel universe that we all are very familiar with in a post MCU kind of world, borrowing aspects of the MCU, but also putting their own spin on it in a fun and engaging and competent way. And so I'm excited to keep playing more of it. So again, I'm only maybe like 3 hours into it, but this is a weekend hype for me as well. Yeah. But it's good so far.
Apparently we have a new segment, Weekend Hype. Shit that hadn't come out yet that we're very excited about.
So stuff we actually haven't done but are thinking about doing it so we can be even more lazy for the show. Let's get on this hype train. Go all the way to Nerdville.
Choo-choo.
Choo-choo. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can find us on other social media as well, specifically the places that Andrew and I frequent, which means you can find me on Instagram for the meantime, at Bethel Comics, and you can find Andrew on Mastodon at profounddark@dice.camp.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you can find by clicking on the link in the corner that says YouTube. Or if you're already there listening to our podcast on YouTube, you should like and subscribe, or as the kids like to say, ring that bell.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusi, the other is called District 4, both written and performed by Kevin MacLeod, the Clan MacLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music and more at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 Attribution License.
If you'd like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to leave some sort of review. Whether a text review or using their proprietary metric will spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms.
All right, so I've got some hot takes.
Okay.
One, we talk about Facebook every time.
Yep.
I get text messages from Facebook like every day since I stopped going on Facebook. and I kind of like, I'm shocked that now I've gotten 3 messages that say, Little Bell, Andrew, did you see Andrew Haspeland? And then a link.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, I did in the mirror.
Right.
I don't know what's going on. It's just very weird.
You're not willing to log in to see what the
I
existential threat
think my
is.
password's fucked. Like,
I see.
Yeah. That's fine. I don't. But yeah. But also, I now want to transition into, hey, do you all know that I've been playing Fallout 76?
No.
Well, guess what? This week, the new big expansion came out. So I'm very excited.
Very cool.
Yeah, Skyline Valley, basically the Shenandoah National Park, got added to the map.
Okay.
And
okay.
I will say that, like, you know what? It's weird that, like, it's a 6-year-old Fallout game,
Yeah.
but they're still adding content. I'm like, wow, I'm here for this. Like, I'm very excited.
Speaking of adding content, we're just going to keep this hype train going, aren't we? A movie was added to Netflix out of nowhere that I was very excited to watch again, and that is Godzilla Minus One. And I was excited, not necessarily to watch it again, although I was excited to watch it again because it's a very good movie, but I was finally excited to watch it in color. I think I talked about it on the show before. I saw Godzilla Minus One was re-released to theaters as Godzilla Minus One minus color. And I'm like, it was an experience where I'm like, it felt like it was filmed this way in black and white. And I was really interested. I never felt like I lost anything by not seeing it in color. There's a couple of scenes where I'm like, there's like rain falling. Is that rain or is it like blood? Right?
Right.
And so I was actually really excited to watch it in color to fill in any gaps, of which there were not many. And in hindsight, there were not any gaps. And I would say, based on my experience and my own aesthetic tastes, it's a better experience in black and white, which is unfortunately not an option for viewing on Netflix. Either way, it's still a good movie. If you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. Watch it and talk about it. It's a great movie. And yeah, hype.
Hype.
So until you get hyped for something, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast. That show wasn't actually very good.
No, it was bad. Cleopatra 2525 was also not good. Us Bruce Campbell fans took what we could get.
Yeah.
Hello.
Well, hello.
Who are you talking to?
To Dan.
Is it just Dan?
Just Dan.
You're talking like there's more people here.
What?
No.
The audience, the dear listeners.
Tell them about the gross thing and we have that we could try later if you want.
Whoa.
Which gross thing? Oh, your big meat stick? No. It's
Tell him about it.
No, go.
Tell him.
Don't you know I am recording so we can get this content going?
Oh, that was good. Damn, man. You're a fucking wizard.
You know how the Winter Soldier has his trigger words? That if you say them, you can basically get him to do whatever you want?
Right.
Andrew has trigger words. And it's 2 words. In 1801...
the revolution had been won, and Uncle Sam's favorite son had a job he needed done.
And furthermore...
sent Jack to a lady, both beautiful and...
smart.
Smart. She found his wits intriguing. A scoundrel with a heart.
From the halls of Montezuma...
Zuma to the shores of Tripoli, there was never a leatherneck raider, a daring dragoon is he. He'll halt the bold advance of Napoleon's attack. There ain't this something sky
something that...
pirate rogue who don't know Jack.